The chamber was built to make visitors feel small. It stretched for nearly 2 kilometers in every direction, carved from black crystal that absorbed light and reflected nothing. The ceiling rose so high that clouds of vapor drifted between the upper tiers, obscuring the highest seats from view. Floating platforms carried delegates from species that could not breathe oxygen, while massive atmospheric bubbles contained beings that existed as pure gas or living flame. Ambassador David Cole stood alone at the center of it. The petitioner's platform was a circle of polished stone barely 3 meters wide. It hovered above a bottomless pit that descended into darkness. The message was clear. You are nothing. You stand above the void only because we allow it. David kept his hands folded behind his back. His gray diplomatic uniform was simple and undecorated. His face showed no emotion. Around him, 14,000 alien representatives watched from their tiered seats. Their forms so varied that the human mind struggled to process them all at once. There were beings made of crystal that pulsed with inner light. There were creatures that resembled giant insects wrapped in ceremonial robes. There were entities that existed as swirling clouds of particles, held together by magnetic fields and ancient technology. Some had dozens of eyes. Some had none. Some communicated through sound, others through color, and others through waves of telepathic pressure that made David's skull ache. The Galactic Council had governed the known universe for 9 million years. They controlled over 800,000 inhabited worlds across 4 separate galaxies. Their combined military forces numbered in the trillions. Their technology could reshape stars and move planets, and they had summoned humanity to answer for its crimes. Arbiter Kethris dominated the central podium. His species, the Vanthari, resembled mantises grown to the size of elephants, with blade-like arms and compound eyes that saw in 17 different spectrums of light. His voice emerged from a translation device mounted on his thorax, cold and mechanical. Human representative, Kethris began, you stand before the oldest governing body in existence. Your species has been a member of the Galactic Compact for only 52 standard cycles. In that time, you have violated no fewer than 47 regulations, ignored 12 direct orders from this council, and expanded into territories specifically forbidden to developing species. David said nothing. The charges are severe, Kethris continued. Unauthorized colonization of the Nephri cluster. Development of weapons technology beyond your permitted level. Interference with protected species on 3 separate worlds. And most troubling of all, the construction of faster-than-light vessels using designs not approved by the Technology Oversight Committee. A ripple passed through the chamber. The collective mind of Brantus, a hive species that controlled most of galactic shipping. BROADCAST. Waves of disapproval that made several nearby delegates physically flinch. The silicon lords of the Ember Drift glowed an angry orange. Your guilt has already been established, Kethris said. You are not here to defend yourself. You are here to receive judgment and to beg forgiveness on behalf of your primitive world. The Council will then decide whether humanity deserves continued existence, or whether your species should be reduced to a manageable population and confined to your home system permanently. David remained motionless for a long moment. Then he reached slowly into his jacket pocket. Every weapon in the chamber trained on him instantly. Security drones dropped from hidden alcoves. Guards from 6 different species moved toward the platform with weapons raised. David withdrew a small data chip and held it up between 2 fingers. Before sentencing, he said calmly, I invoke Article 7 of the Founding Charter, the right of any accused party to present evidence before judgment is rendered. Kethris's mandibles clicked with irritation. This is not a trial, human. Your guilt is not in question. Article 7 makes no distinction, David replied. It applies to all proceedings before the full council. I have memorized your charter, High Arbiter. Perhaps you should review it yourself. Shocked silence filled the chamber. No developing species had ever spoken to the High Arbiter with such disrespect. Several delegates leaned forward with sudden interest. Others broadcast confusion and outrage. Kethris stared at the human for a long moment. "Very well," he said finally. "Present your evidence." "It will change nothing." David pressed the chip, and holographic displays erupted across the entire chamber. Star maps, intercepted communications, genetic analyses, financial records spanning centuries. The images filled every available space, impossible to ignore. "For the past 300 years, David began, his voice carrying clearly through the translation systems, the Galactic Council has operated a secret program called the Shepherd Protocol. Its purpose is to identify emerging species, offer them membership in the Compact, and then systematically prevent them from ever becoming powerful enough to challenge the established order." The chamber exploded with noise. Thousands of voices speaking in hundreds of languages, all at once. Kethris slammed his ceremonial staff against his podium, demanding silence. "These are lies," the Arbiter declared. "Desperate fabrications from a species facing consequences for its arrogance." "Are they?" David asked. "The communications I have displayed show direct orders from this council to sabotage human research facilities. The genetic records prove that the protected species on Nefri 3 were artificially created and placed there specifically to block our colonization claims. And the financial data shows payments from council accounts to terrorist organizations operating within human space." He let the words sink in. "You did not invite humanity into the Compact out of generosity," David continued. "You did it to control us, to watch us, to ensure we would never grow strong enough to threaten your power. Every gift of technology you provided was designed to fail. Every treaty you offered was structured to limit our growth. You have been strangling humanity since the day we joined." Kethris rose to his full terrifying height. "You dare accuse this council of conspiracy? We have ended species for lesser insults. We have sterilized worlds. Your tiny fleet of primitive ships would not survive a single hour against our combined forces." David looked up at the towering Arbiter without fear. "High Arbiter Kethris," he said quietly, "I did not come here to beg for mercy. I did not come here to apologize. And I did not come here to negotiate." He straightened his jacket. "On behalf of the United Earth Government, and by the authority granted to me as humanity's sole representative to the Galactic Compact, I hereby declare that a state of war now exists between the human species and the Galactic Council." For 5 full seconds, nothing moved, then Kethris laughed. The sound was horrible, a clicking screech that echoed through the crystal chamber. Other delegates joined in. The collective mind broadcast waves of mocking amusement. The Silicon Lords flickered with contempt. "You declare war?" Kethris managed between clicks. "Against an alliance that commands 10 trillion warships? Against civilizations that were ancient before your son was born?" David waited for the laughter to fade. "You should not have laughed," he said softly, and then every light in the chamber went dark. When they flickered back on 3 seconds later, every holographic display in the room showed the same image. Earth, a pale blue sphere rotating slowly in the void. Below it, a timer appeared. It read 0 hours 59 minutes and 59 seconds, and it began counting down. "What is this?" Kethris demanded, his laughter gone. David smiled for the first time. "That, High Arbiter, is how long you have to evacuate this. Station before my people show you exactly why you are right to be afraid of us." The countdown continued. 0:59 to 4500, 59, 4400, 59:43. Across the chamber, 14,000 delegates began to panic. And at the center of the chaos, Ambassador David Cole stood perfectly still, watching the clock tick down toward humanity's moment of truth. 52 years earlier, humanity had celebrated its first contact with alien life. Ships from the Galactic Council had appeared in orbit above Earth, and the world had wept with joy. "We are not alone," the headlines screamed. "The universe welcomes us." Ambassador Maria Torres had been the first human to set foot in the council chamber. She had stood on the same platform where David now stood, and she had accepted membership in the Galactic Compact, with tears streaming down her face. It was the greatest moment in human history. It was also the beginning of humanity's enslavement. The truth emerged slowly over the following decades. Human scientists noticed that the technology gifts from the Council always seemed to break down at critical moments. Engineers discovered hidden kill switches in the power systems the Council had provided. Intelligence operatives intercepted communications, suggesting that Earth was being watched, monitored, and controlled. In the 30th year of humanity's membership in the Compact, a group of officials gathered in a bunker beneath the Swiss Alps. They called themselves the Prometheus Circle. Their leader was Fleet Admiral Thomas Grayson, a man who had spent 20 years pretending to be grateful for alien generosity, while secretly documenting every act of sabotage and suppression. "They are farming us," Grayson told the assembled leaders. "Every emerging species receives the same treatment. We are given just enough technology to be useful, but never enough to be dangerous. They call it the Shepherd Protocol. They have been doing this for millions of years." The Prometheus Circle made a decision that night. Humanity would continue to play the role of grateful newcomers. They would smile and bow and accept every limitation placed upon them. But in secret, they would prepare for the day when they could finally break free. For 22 years, human scientists worked in hidden facilities scattered across the solar system. They reverse-engineered Council technology and found its weaknesses. They developed new systems that operated on principles the Council had never imagined. And they created a weapon. They called it the Fold Engine, the Council's faster-than-light. Technology worked by pushing ships through something called subspace, a dimension beneath normal reality. The Fold Engine worked differently. It did not push ships through anything. Instead, it bent space itself, folding two distant points together until they touched. But the Fold Engine could do something else. Something terrible. It could create a permanent fold in space that prevented any other FTL technology from functioning. Within the affected region, subspace travel became impossible. Ships would be trapped, unable to escape, unable to call for help. Humanity had built the ultimate weapon against a civilization that depended on faster-than-light travel for its very survival. Admiral Grayson selected David Cole for the final mission 3 years before the confrontation. David had spent his career as a mid-level diplomat, deliberately keeping a low profile while memorizing every detail of galactic law and council procedure. He was patient, intelligent, and completely unafraid of death. "You will likely not survive," Grayson told him. "The moment you declare war, they may simply kill you." David had nodded. "I understand. But if you can hold their attention long enough, if you can keep them focused on you instead of looking for our fleet, we will have a chance." The plan was elegant in its simplicity. Humanity knew they could not defeat the Council in open battle. Even with the Fold Engine, they were outnumbered by billions to 1. But they did not need to win. They only needed to change the game. Hidden throughout Council space, human operatives had placed thousands of Fold Engine satellites. If activated simultaneously, they would create a network of no travel zones that would shatter the galactic economy. The collective mind of Brantis would lose 80% of its shipping routes overnight. The Silicon Lords would be cut off from their mining operations in the Outer Rim. The Council itself would be unable to coordinate its forces. Humanity was not threatening to fight a war. They were threatening to end an empire. Now, in the Council chamber, the countdown continued. 0 hours 47 minutes and 33 seconds. High Arbiter Kethris had recovered from his initial shock. He stood at his podium, issuing rapid commands through his communication implants. Security forces were mobilizing throughout the station. The Council's defensive fleet was moving into position around the human vessel that had brought David to this place. Destroy the human ship, Kethris ordered. Kill their ambassador. This ends now. The order went out. 300 warships turned their weapons toward the small human transport floating in space beyond the station. They fired simultaneously, enough firepower to crack a small moon. The beams passed through empty space. The human ship was gone. Where is it? Kethris demanded. Find it. Sensor officers across the fleet began reporting in, their voices confused and frightened. The human ship was not hiding. It had not fled. It was still there, still visible on their screens. It was just in 12 different places at once. That is impossible. Kethris whispered. David spoke from his platform, his voice cutting through the chaos. The Fold engine does more than trap ships, High Arbiter. It allows us to exist in multiple spatial locations simultaneously. Your weapons cannot target us because we are everywhere and nowhere. Your sensors cannot track us because the very concept of position no longer applies. He gestured at the displays still hovering throughout the chamber. Right now, there are 4,000 Fold satellites hidden throughout Council space. If the countdown reaches 0, they will activate. Every major shipping lane will be severed. Every fleet will be stranded. Your empire will collapse within a year. The collective mind of Brantis broadcast a wave of pure terror. They were a species built entirely around trade and transport. Without FTL travel, they would starve. You are bluffing, Kethris said, but his voice had lost its confidence. Am I? David asked. You spent 50 years trying to keep humanity weak. You sabotaged our research. You murdered our scientists. You funded terrorists who attacked our colonies. And through all of it, we smiled and pretended not to notice. He stepped forward to the very edge of his platform. We are not bluffing, High Arbiter. We have been preparing for this moment since the day we learned the truth about your compact. Every insult we endured, every humiliation we suffered, was simply humanity buying time. And now our time has come. The countdown passed 40 minutes remaining. Across the chamber, delegates were arguing, screaming, broadcasting waves of panic and anger. Several species were already attempting to evacuate, fighting through crowds to reach their ships. Others were demanding that Kethris negotiate, surrender, do anything to stop what was coming. But not everyone was panicking. At the far end of the chamber, in the highest and oldest seats, the architects of Eternum sat in perfect silence. They were the founding species of the Council, beings of pure energy who had existed for over 1 billion years. They had not spoken in a council session for 10,000 years. Now, slowly, one of them began to glow, and David Cole felt something he had not expected to feel. Fear. Because the architects were looking directly at him, and they were smiling. The architects of Eternum had witnessed the birth of galaxies. They had seen stars form from dust and collapse into darkness. They had watched 1,000 species rise to power and fade into extinction. In all that time, they had rarely found anything worth their attention. Until now, the lead architect drifted down from the highest tier, its form shifting and pulsing with light that hurt to look at directly. It had no face, no body in any traditional sense. It was simply a presence, a concentration of energy so dense that reality bent around it. It stopped in front of David's platform. When it spoke, the words did not come through the translation systems. They simply appeared in David's mind, clear and cold. "We know what you are doing, little human." David forced himself to remain calm. His heart was pounding, but his face showed nothing. "Then you know that I am not bluffing." "Of course you are bluffing," the architect replied. "The fold engine is real. Your satellites are real, but you have no intention of actually activating them." The countdown continued behind David, 0 hours 35 minutes and 22 seconds. "You do not know that," David said carefully. The architect pulsed with something that might have been amusement. "We have watched your species since before you climbed down from the trees. We have studied every human who has ever lived. We know your patterns, your psychology, your limitations. And we know this: humans do not commit suicide. Not as individuals, not as a species." It moved closer. "If you activate those satellites, the galactic economy will collapse. Billions will die, including billions of humans on colony worlds that depend on trade for survival. You would never sacrifice your own people, Ambassador. It is not in your nature." David felt ice form in his stomach. The architect was right. The Prometheus Circle had debated this exact point for years. The fold weapon was meant to be a threat, a deterrent. Actually using it would cause suffering beyond imagination, including to humanity itself, but he could not let the architect see his doubt. "Perhaps you do not know humanity as well as you think," David said. "Perhaps you have forgotten that we are the species that invented nuclear weapons and then used them on ourselves. Perhaps you do not remember that we burned our own cities and poisoned our own planet before we ever reached the stars." He met the architect's formless gaze directly. "We are not like you. We do not live forever. We do not think in millennia. Every generation of humans faces its own death, and we have learned to accept sacrifice in ways that immortal beings cannot understand. Push us far enough, and we will burn everything down just to prove a point." The architect was silent for a long moment. In the chamber around them, chaos continued. The collective mind of Brantis was broadcasting emergency signals to every ship in their fleet. The Silicon Lords were threatening to destroy the human vessel themselves, regardless of the consequences. High Arbiter Kethris was trying to restore order while simultaneously negotiating through back channels with dozens of species. And through it all, the countdown continued, 0 hours 28 minutes and 45 seconds. The architect spoke again, its voice now carrying something that might have been respect. "You are more interesting than we expected, Ambassador. Most species grovel when they stand before us. They beg for mercy, offer worship, promise eternal service. But you are standing here, threatening to tear apart everything we have built." It pulsed brighter. "We have a counteroffer." David waited. "The Shepherd Protocol exists." "Because the universe is dying," the architect said. "Ev, our star that burns consumes finite energy. Every species that expands takes resources. It cannot be replaced. We created the Council to manage this reality, to ensure that civilization survives until the last light fades." The images around the chamber shifted, now showing projections of galactic decay. Stars going dark, civilizations collapsing, entropy winning its eternal war against order. "In 100 billion years, the universe will be cold and empty," the architect continued. "We are trying to delay that moment for as long as possible. The Shepherd Protocol is not cruelty, Ambassador. It is survival." David shook his head slowly. "Survival by keeping billions of beings in chains is not survival. It is tyranny wearing a mask." "Then offer us an alternative," the architect said. "Prove that your species has something new to contribute, and perhaps we will reconsider our position." This was the moment David had prepared for. The true reason humanity had risked everything on this confrontation. The Fold engine does more than bend space, David said. Our scientists discovered something unexpected when they were developing it. The folds do not just connect points in normal space. They can reach beyond, into parallel dimensional states that exist alongside our own reality. He pulled up new displays showing theoretical models and experimental data. Those dimensions are not empty. They contain energy. Vast amounts of energy, enough to power entire galaxies for trillions of years. The universe is not dying, architect. We have simply been looking in the wrong places. The chamber fell silent. The architect studied the data, its form flickering with what might have been surprise. This is untested theory, it said finally. You cannot prove it will work. No, David admitted, but I can prove that your current approach is failing. Every species you suppress, every mind you silence, every civilization you prevent from growing, represents potential that is lost forever. How many discoveries have died because the Council was afraid what they might become? He gestured at the assembly around them. You have been so focused on conserving what exists that you have forgotten how to grow. Humanity is offering you something your empire lost 1 billion years ago. Hope. The architect was silent for a long time. Finally, it spoke. You make a compelling argument, Ambassador. We will discuss this with the other architects. But first, there is a problem. David frowned. What problem? The architect turned, looking toward the High Arbiter's podium. Kethris has decided that he would rather let the galaxy burn than lose his power. He has just ordered the station's core to overload. In approximately 12 minutes, this entire facility will explode with enough force to destroy everything within 1 million kilometers. David stared at the architect in horror. He would kill 14,000 delegates? His own people? He would kill everyone, the architect replied. Including you, including us, rather than face a future where humans hold any power at all. All. The countdown showed 0 hours 19 minutes and 33 seconds. Now there was a second timer. The station's core was already beginning to glow dot, and High Arbiter Kethris was nowhere to be seen. The station had been built to last forever. Its crystalline walls had stood for 9 million years, surviving wars and disasters and the slow decay of empires. Now those walls were beginning to vibrate as the core beneath them, overloaded with impossible energy. David ran through corridors packed with panicking delegates. Species that had never cooperated in their entire histories were now pushing past each other, fighting to reach evacuation pods that could not possibly hold them all. The air was filled with screams and howls and telepathic bursts of pure terror. The architect floated beside him, moving through solid matter as easily as air. Kethris has barricaded himself in the primary control center, it said directly into David's mind. He has locked out all external access. No one can reach him. Then how do we stop the overload? David demanded. There is a secondary control station in the lower levels. It was built as a failsafe in case the primary systems were ever compromised. If you can reach it, you might be able to shut down the core manually. David changed direction, heading for the nearest transit shaft. Behind him, the core timer continued counting down 0 hours 9 minutes and 44 seconds. The transit shaft was jammed with bodies. So David found an emergency access ladder and began climbing down. The station was enormous, built to accommodate species that ranged from microscopic to mountainous. The lower levels seemed impossibly far away. Why are you helping me? David asked as he climbed. A few minutes ago, you were trying to convince me to surrender. The architect kept pace with him, drifting through the walls and floors like a ghost. We have lived for over 1 billion years, it replied. In that time, we have seen countless species make countless threats. Most of them were empty. Yours was not. David reached a landing and kept moving, his lungs burning. The fold engine represents something genuinely new. The possibility of accessing parallel dimensions, of finding energy sources we never imagined. If there is even a small chance that your theory is correct, we cannot afford to let it die here. They reached the lower levels. The corridors here were darker, older, filled with equipment that had not been used in centuries. David followed the architect's directions, moving through maintenance tunnels and forgotten storage chambers. 0 hours 6 minutes and 12 seconds. There, the architect said, indicating a massive door sealed with energy barriers. The secondary control station. David approached the door and tried to access the controls. They were locked, requiring authorization codes that no human possessed. "Can you open it?" he asked. "No. The barriers are designed to block even energy-based life forms. This station was built by species that feared us as much as they feared each other." David studied the door. It was solid, reinforced, impossible to breach with the tools he had available. But there had to be a way. There was always a way. Then he noticed something. A small panel beside the door, covered in symbols that looked almost familiar. "What is that?" he asked. The architect studied it. "An emergency override. It can only be activated by a species that is not registered in the Council database." David stared at the panel. A species that is not registered? When the station was built, the founders wanted a failsafe that could not be corrupted by politics. They created locks that could only be opened by true outsiders. By the time of the first council session, such outsiders no longer existed. The system has never been used. David understood. Humanity had been in the compact for 52 years, but they had never been fully integrated. Their genetic data was in the system, but their neural patterns, their biometric signatures, had never been completely cataloged. The Council had always kept them at arm's length. Now that distance might save everyone. He pressed his hand against the panel. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the symbols flared with light, and the door began to open. "Fascinating," the architect said. "It seems the founders understood something we forgot. True safety comes from diversity, not control." David rushed into the control station. The room was filled with ancient technology, covered in dust, but still humming with power. He found the main console and began working, trying to figure out how to shut down the core. 0 hours 3 minutes and 28 seconds. The controls were in a language he did not recognize, but some things were universal. Power readings, temperature displays, emergency shutdown protocols. David worked through them one by one, making educated guesses and watching the results. "There," the architect said, highlighting a specific control. "That will initiate an emergency vent, releasing the core's energy into space instead of allowing it to explode." David reached for the control, and then pain exploded through his shoulder. He stumbled forward, looking down at the energy burn that had torn through his uniform and scorched his flesh. Behind him, High Arbiter Kethris stood in the doorway, a weapon raised. "I knew someone would try this," Kethris said. His compound eyes reflected the emergency lights, making him look more like a demon than a diplomat. "I have been waiting." David tried to reach for the control again, but Kethris fired once more, hitting his arm. David collapsed against the console, his vision swimming with pain. "You have ruined everything," Kethris hissed. "The Council is perfect. The Shepherd Protocol maintained order across 4 galaxies. And you, a primitive ape from a primitive world, dared to challenge it." He advanced into the room, his weapon trained on David's head. "Do you know what happens to species that defy us? We do not simply kill them. We erase them. Every record, every memory, every trace of their existence. In 1,000 years, no one will even remember that humans existed." 0 hours 1 minute and 45 seconds, David looked at the control, still just out of reach. He looked at the weapon pointed at his face. He looked at the countdown timer on the wall. Then he looked at the architect. "You said you have watched humanity since before we climbed down from the trees," he said, his voice weak but steady. "Then you know what we do when we have nothing left to lose." The architect pulsed with understanding. David smiled, and then he threw himself at Kethris. The High Arbiter fired, but David was already moving. The shot missed by centimeters. They collided, and David's momentum carried them both backward, away from the console, away from the countdown that continued to fall. 0 hours, 0 minutes, and 58 seconds. They crashed to the floor, fighting for control of the weapon. Kethris was stronger, his insectoid body built for combat. But David was desperate, and desperation made him dangerous. 0 hours, 0 minutes, and 31 seconds. The weapon discharged wildly, blowing holes in the walls and ceiling. Sparks rained down around them. David felt Kethris's claws tear into his side, but he did not stop fighting. 0 hours, 0 minutes, and 15 seconds. The architect moved. It could not touch physical matter, could not affect the console directly. But it could do one thing. It could position itself directly in front of Kethris's eyes. Blazing with light bright enough to blind, Kethris screamed and released David. Clawing at his own face, David crawled toward the console. 0 hours, 0 minutes, and 7 seconds. He reached up, blood dripping from his wounds. His vision fading. 0 hours, 0 minutes, and 4 seconds. His fingers found the control. 0 hours, 0 minutes, and 2 seconds. He pressed it, and the station shuddered as the core vented its energy into the void of space. The explosion that would have killed 14,000 beings, transforming into nothing more than a spectacular light show visible from 3 star systems away. David lay on the floor, breathing hard, as Kethris writhed in blind agony beside him. The architect hovered above them both. "You were right about one thing, Ambassador," it said quietly. "Humanity is not like us at all." The countdown for the Fold satellites still showed on David's personal display. 0 hours, 0 minutes, and 47 seconds. He had saved the station, but the real choice still remained. The station was saved. 14,000 delegates were alive. High Arbiter Kethris lay bound and blinded, surrounded by security forces from a dozen species who had witnessed his attempted genocide. And Ambassador David Cole sat in the emergency medical bay, watching the final seconds tick away on the Fold satellite countdown. 0 hours, 0 minutes, and 22 seconds. The architect materialized beside his bed, its form dimmer now after the effort of blinding Kethris. "You must make a choice, Ambassador. In 20 seconds, the Fold satellites will activate automatically. The only way to stop them is a direct command from your government." David looked at the timer. Everything humanity had worked for came down to this moment. For 52 years, they had planned and prepared and sacrificed. They had built a weapon that could bring the mightiest empire in history to its knees. And now he had to decide whether to use it. 0 hours, 0 minutes, and 15 seconds. "Tell me something," David said quietly. "If I let the satellites activate, what happens to the galaxy?" The architect considered the question. Economic collapse within 6 months. Widespread famine within a year. Wars over remaining resources within 2. The collective mind of Brantis will fracture into competing factions. The Silicon Lords will retreat to their home systems and never emerge again. The Council will cease to exist as a functioning government. And humanity? Your species will survive. You have prepared well. Your colonies are self-sufficient. Your people are adaptable. In the chaos that follows, you will have the chance to build something new. 0 hours, 0 minutes, and 8 seconds, David closed his eyes. He thought about Earth, about the billions of people who had trusted him to fight for their future, about the soldiers and scientists and diplomats who had given their lives to make this moment possible. He thought about Admiral Grayson, who had died 3 years ago, believing that this day would come. He thought about Maria Torres, the first ambassador, who had wept with joy when humanity joined the compact. Not knowing what horrors awaited, 0 hours 0 minutes and 4 seconds, he opened his eyes. "Cancel the activation," he said into his communication device. "Authorization code Prometheus 77 Delta. Stand down." The countdown stopped at 0 hours 0 minutes and 2 seconds. Across the galaxy, 4,000-fold satellites powered down and returned to dormant mode. The architect studied David with what might have been surprise. "You could have destroyed us. Why did you stop?" David smiled, though it hurt to move his face. "Because we did not come here to destroy anyone. We came here to be free. And you cannot build freedom on the graves of billions." He looked at the ceiling, where the station's crystal structure filtered starlight into patterns of impossible beauty. "My people have a saying, an eye for an eye makes the whole world blind. If we had activated those satellites, we would have won. But we would have become exactly what we were fighting against." The architect was silent for a long moment. "You are a strange species, Ambassador. You threaten annihilation and then show mercy. You fight with everything you have and then offer peace. We have existed for 1 billion years, and we still do not understand you." "Good," David said. "Keep trying to figure us out. It will give us something to talk about." 2 days later, David stood once again on the petitioner's platform. But the chamber had changed. The towering tiers were still there, the delegates still assembled, but the atmosphere was different. High Arbiter Cathur's podium stood empty, a reminder of what had almost happened in his place. The eldest of the architects hovered at the center of the chamber. "The Galactic Council has deliberated," the architect announced, its voice resonating through every mind present. "The charges against humanity are hereby dismissed. The Shepherd Protocol is officially dissolved. All species previously designated as cultivars are now granted full rights and privileges within the compact." A wave of shock passed through the assembly. Delegates who had spent centuries under the protocol's restrictions stared in disbelief. Some wept. Others broadcast waves of joy so powerful that the translation systems overloaded. "Furthermore," the architect continued, "the Council recognizes humanity's contribution to galactic science. The research into parallel dimensional energy sources will be shared freely with all member species. A new era of exploration begins today." David listened to the announcement, his wounds still bandaged, his body still weak. But he was smiling. The architect turned to face him directly. "Ambassador Cole, your species declared war on the Galactic Council. Traditionally, such declarations cannot be withdrawn. However, given the circumstances, we are prepared to offer an alternative resolution." David raised an eyebrow. "What did you have in mind?" "Join us. Not as subjects, not as members, but as partners. Help us build something new from the ashes of the old." David thought about it for exactly 1 second. "We accept." The chamber erupted in a mixture of celebration and chaos. Some species cheered. Others protested. The Silicon Lords glowed with frustrated anger, while the remnants of the collective mind broadcast waves of anxious uncertainty. But it did not matter. The vote had already been taken. The decision had already been made. Humanity was no longer a child species, struggling to survive in a universe of giants. They were equals, partners, the beginning of something new. 3 months later, David Cole stood in a very different setting. Earth orbit. A viewing platform aboard the newly completed Unity station, built jointly by humans and 17 other species that had once been trapped under the Shepherd Protocol. Beside him stood the architect, its form now familiar, almost friendly. We received confirmation this morning, David said. The first expedition to the dimensional boundary will launch next week. Scientists from over 100 worlds will be participating. The architect pulsed with something like approval. And if your theory is wrong? If there is no energy to be found beyond our dimension? David shrugged. Then we will find something else. That is what humans do. We keep trying until we find a way forward. A strange philosophy. It has served us well so far. They watched in silence as a new ship emerged from the construction yards below. It was unlike anything the galaxy had seen before. A fusion of human engineering and alien technology, designed to push the boundaries of what was possible. Its name was painted in white letters across the hall. Second Dawn. Tell me something, the architect said. When you stood in the council chamber and declared war, were you afraid? David considered the question. Terrified, he admitted. I thought I was going to die. I thought everyone I loved was going to die. I thought humanity's story would end right there, in that chamber, surrounded by enemies who saw us as nothing more than insects to be crushed. And yet you did it anyway. Yes. David watched the Second Dawn begin its final preparations, its engines glowing with the promise of journeys to come. Because some things are worth dying for, he said quietly. Freedom is one of them. Hope is another. And the chance to show the universe that a small species from a small planet can stand up to the oldest empire in existence and refuse to. Neil, he turned to face the architect. You asked me once why we are so strange, why we threaten and then show mercy, why we fight and then make peace. The architect waited. It is because we are not fighting for conquest. We are fighting for tomorrow, and tomorrow belongs to everyone. The Second Dawn's engines fired, and the ship rose from the construction yards. Climbing toward the stars, David Cole watched it go, knowing that somewhere out there, in dimensions yet unexplored, humanity's greatest adventures were just beginning. The universe had tried to keep them small. It had failed, and now the real story could begin.